What's up everyone, Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have an album review for you. So yet another one that came out on the 19th of November was the sophomore effort from The Lurking Fear. Death, Madness, Horror, Decay. This comes out on Century Media Records. This band formed in 2016 in Gothenburg, Sweden. Again, their second album, and this band, I guess you could say, is a supergroup. It features Thomas Lindberg, Adrian Erlandson, and Jonas Stallhammer of At the Gates, as well as Andreas Axelsson of Tormented, and Fredrik Wallenberg, formerly of the band Sarcasm. These guys pretty much just got together and decided to make a flat-out death metal band. And this band, while they are from Gothenburg, holy shit, they sound like they're from Stockholm. This is straight up death metal. This avoids any sort of melodic death metal tropes that you would expect from, guys from At the Gates. This is more raw, riffy, thrashy, and ugly. In terms of melody on here, that's more sinister, more dark. It doesn't really have any sort of melodic death metal tropes at all, which actually I thought was really cool because for those that didn't think the new At the Gates was particularly that heavy, I thought it was really good. It is maybe not as heavy as previous work, but this might scratch that itch for heavier material from those same guys, because this is just riff-a-minute, intense death metal. The first three tracks in here are pretty much a blitz. After you get past the very creepy and, appropriately, nasty death metal intro that takes up, maybe the first minute of Abyssal Slime, full tilt boogie, we're going into very thrashy, just entombed Dismember, and honestly, a lot of this reminded me of Desultory. It has a little bit more of a thrash sound. Adrian Erlandson is doing more of like kind of a thrashy blast beat. It's not like that full-on, like death metal blast beat where it's just going nuts. It's still a little bit more controlled, and Thomas Lindberg's vocals are just a bit more raw on this. They sound a bit more deep and snarly, and then the guitars, it's HM2. It's very HM2. They are bitey, they are chunky as hell. And these first three tracks hit you like a series of jabs, especially Death Reborn, which is barely over a minute, but they still did a video for it, and it pretty much condenses all that thrashy energy into that solid minute of brutality. Now, this was actually produced by the same guy who did the last At the Gates album, and it could not be any more different. A lot of the lush atmosphere is kind of stripped out in favor of just being sort of raw and intense. In terms of atmosphere, a lot of it is generated by dissonant lead melodies. There's occasionally a creepy sample, but for the most part, it's on lead melodies. And solos aren't really a big thing on here. You have at least one pretty distinct one in 1,000 Horrors Crowned, and then you have some really cool, like more straight up death metal ugly solos that are traded off in Leech of the Aeons. A lot of this is just lead melodies on top of big chuggy riffs, and actually it feels more appropriate. It feels, that kind of proper level of stripped down where it's just supposed to be like in your face at all times, just kind of driving big nasty riffs and keeping that energy up. And honestly, the riffs are catchy as hell. It's just, a nice contrast between the melodic death metal that generally you kind of expect from these guys. Now, I know Thomas Lindberg is perpetually busy apparently this year because we also have releases from Dysphere and Lockup to look forward to. So it's really cool to hear him do a lot of different stuff here, and this is definitely, again, far removed from At the Gates. Now, while those first three tracks are just a blitz of thrashy, aggressive death metal, you do get some more like chuggy, mid-tempo stuff. Funeral Abyss, Architects of Madness, and Restless Death both kind of dive into that more like Asphyx, maybe Bolt Thrower, but kind of played as, well, Bloodbath. These songs really kind of labor more groove, more atmospheric building. There's a little bit more dynamics. It isn't all fast and, in your face at all times. And I kind of like that nice little break in there. An interesting thing on this, though, is some tracks feel like continuations of the previous track. Death Reborn kind of just goes right into Cosmic Macabre. And honestly, it just sounds like there was just a brief break in the song because the songs are kind of similar. And Funeral Abyss goes right into the title track on here, which kind of continues on with that more groove-oriented sound, but also brings in more thrashy bits. And honestly, that song kind of screamed like this is pretty much everything they're about. Like, it pretty much has every element that pretty much shows up on this album, and delivers it well. It's also interesting when it comes down to like subject matter. This is definitely more like traditional death metal tropes, and there's a lot of Lovecraftian worship on here, versus the last At the Gates was definitely more philosophical, which I guess you could say Lovecraft has a philosophy. It's pretty much stay away from large tentacled things and don't wake them the fuck up. It's a bad idea. Now, I do take issue with the fact that they do have an awesome guest star in here with Chris Reifert of Autopsy and, of course, you know, Death in the early years. But he's only on essentially an interlude, which kind of bugged me because I feel if you get Chris Reifert just to growl his guts out, you should have him for a longer song than a minute 36-second interlude. I mean, it's Chris Reifert. He deserves more than just an interlude. But he does make his presence felt on that one. It is kind of a cool, dreary interlude. I just feel like they could have had him on there for one of the full songs on here. This whole thing kind of feels like Gothenburg's tribute to Stockholm. The two styles definitely kind of separated in terms of what they do, but this really feels like an homage to, you know, Entombed and Dismember. I mean, we'll even throw in Bloodbath in there. They really kind of just latch on to that sound. And while it's not terribly original, they really don't need to reinvent the wheel here. The wheel is solid. Keep rolling on it. And the fact that HM2 death metal is all over the place, it's really cool hearing guys that actually are in a completely different camp take a stab at it and honestly do it better than their debut. I picked up Out of a Voiceless Grave when it came out, not really knowing who all was in it, but honestly, I felt like that album wasn't as focused as this one. This one has a clear drive to it. I really like how it's paced. It's really interesting how it has like this fast opening, a nice mid-tempo section, and then they start mixing up towards the end. That one just kind of felt like a collection of ideas that were kind of just thrown on the album. Not really bad, but this is definitely a clear improvement. I also like how this one is just a little bit more broad in terms of the scope. Like you get more, you know, different extreme elements in there. One in Flesh actually has like flat out machine gun thrashy guitars towards the end. It really kind of takes away like the death metal feel of it and kind of just brings this nasty thrash vibe to it. And in A Thousand Horrors Crowned goes full on D beat and kind of brings the punk and definitely reminds you that there is a Dysphere album coming eventually too. But it's different than that. This doesn't feel like just a crust punk D beat band. This feels like a death metal band that loves crust punk and D beat, which makes up a lot of the Stockholm scene, actually. And overall, I like the fact that this is melodic and catchy, but not in a melodeath way. Like this feels, again, far removed from it, and I like that the fact that there's definitely some distance between this and At the Gates in particular. But generally, anything that Thomas Lindberg is involved in definitely kind of sounds more far removed from At the Gates. I kind of like the fact that he's in a lot of very different projects. Overall, this was a lot of fun to listen to. I didn't really know what to expect. Again, I didn't necessarily think their debut was bad, but I did not think it was as good as this. So in terms of being hyped for this, really wasn't that hyped, but I wanted to check it out. And man, this really fucking whooped ass. So overall, I'm going to give this 4 stars. This is a sophomore slump avoided. This actually comes out swinging. It delivers on just flat out old school death metal. Again, not melodic death metal. Not that I have a problem with that, but I like the fact that this is very different. It's way more aggressive. The mood and the atmosphere on here is just kind of gross, and you get lots of cool horror vibes to it, but mainly it comes down to just riffs and just raw aggression on this, and man, do they flat out execute on all fronts on this. I actually would have liked to have heard the shorter tracks kind of expanded upon. Death Reborn's a good song, but I feel like there was room for just maybe another minute. And the interlude's really cool. I just feel like, man, you could have had Chris Reifert on a longer song, and I'm pretty sure he would have owned it on there too. My complaints about this are very minimal. Again, it doesn't necessarily reinvent the wheel, but who the fuck asked anyone to reinvent the wheel? Just deliver some solid death metal, and that is exactly what this release did. So if you're a big fan of more Stockholm sounding death metal, but you want to hear a band from Gothenburg do it, this is that release, I would say. Also, if you're patiently waiting by for another Bloodbath release, like I am, this would definitely tide you over. So I recommend definitely checking this out. So yeah, go out there and find this one, jam it. I guarantee if you love death metal, you're gonna have a good time. So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you would like to help us out there will be a link down below. We also have t-shirts for sale. If you would like one, hit us up on thrallsofmetal@gmail.com. Send us a message, put shirts in there, and we will get back to you and hopefully sell you a shirt. We're working on expanding our Thralls merch. I guess that's the word for it. Swag, stuff, we'll call it stuff or things. Anyway, we'd like your opinion on that in terms of stuff that, you know, we could carry. Would you like beer koozies? Would you like stupid bobbleheads? Would you like Jammin' John in a crate with no holes drilled in it, but he still has like a hamster feeder bottle? We can send you him. We will even cover shipping. We just got to make sure he's nice and quiet in there. Probably have to dope him up a bit. Just let us know down in the comments. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. You definitely keep us going. And with that, we will catch you later.